Yeah, if Mike Bromley will stop. I'm Kimberly Thomas, and I've got a microphone. I'm going to sing.
Sing right into it.
We need James here. Kimberly Thomas, and thanks to everybody for coming out. Wolfe Island Historical Society. I have to write it down because I don't have a very good memory. But I do know the purpose of the Wolfe Island Historical Society is to ensure the preservation, collection, and sharing of an accurate account of Wolfe Island history with our residents, visitors, and those interested. So that's really cool. I'm new to the island, only been here a few years, but I love it. And I love that we can share these stories and learn things from each other. I'm going to just take care of a few business things and then I'll pass things along, I promise. But for this talk, we sent out a flyer to everybody's mailbox on the island. And I wondered, is there anybody here that actually came because they saw the flyer? Because it costs some money. And we wouldn't do it again.
Sure.
Yeah? And the mailbox makes a difference then. Okay, good to know. And if anybody wants to volunteer, anybody that is a person on the board can help you with that, or any breathing body in the room. We love volunteers. We can use them for everything. If you have stories that you think are interesting, let us know. And one other thing before I introduce Brian is to introduce Amanda. You guys stand up now, hon. This is Amanda. What's your last name? Nevis from Queen's University, and she's working to archive all the information that's up in the attic of the town hall. Can you imagine? So we're very proud of that project. It's a project that we've been working through with Queen's, but she's doing a great job, and she, so anytime you see her, give her some food or something. And so here's Captain Brian to do the rest of it. Okay, thanks, guys.
Hold off a second. There's a couple of stragglers out in the parking lot. They're going into cars and stuff. I'm not sure if that's... Oh, here they come. Everything's all right. Come in. No, come on in. Come on in. Everything's all right. We let Mike in, so the door's always open.
Anne-Marie.
Lots of chairs up here, guys, too.
Anne-Marie. Move your mouse pad. Move your mouse pad.
Yep.
Down on the...
You have a sit here.
There you go.
That's where I get my nerve.
Double click.
There's some chairs up here, guys, too. All
There you go.
kinds. Now, those of you who have trouble seeing or hearing, the Honorable Ken will let you climb up in these chairs, and that should boost you right over to the back there. Mike, do you need a better view? He'll just wheel you around. Yeah. There you go. You can adjust your hearing as he pushes you back and forth. The hardest thing about getting a speaker for the Wolfe Island Historical Society is getting a speaker. Okay, let me make that perfectly clear. And we have a Wolfe Islander who is more than willing to step up to the plate, and he's here to talk about our own heritage, because we have people talking about different people and places and things, so I'm going to read it, lest I leave out one name. Very brief, quickly. People, property, and Ploughs. So how people have made their living over here in Wolfe Island, including my family going way back. He'll talk about individuals and their projects, such as people like Islanders like Winfield Woodman, Mr. Bruce Devine, Gene Tarrant, Grant Pike, Bill Bolton, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present for us today, there's his name, Mr. Lorne Keyes.
2 years ago, I was asked by a group, by the way, just to check the audio, my voice is usually pretty strong, but I have no objection to using the microphone either. But 2 years ago, a group in Kingston called the Later Life Learning Group was looking for a speaker on the topic of space. Now, I knew about the learning group, the Later Life Learning Group. So I said, well, okay, I know a bit about space. So through a colleague, eventually I volunteered for the job, like I did today, basically. And it wasn't too long before I got a call from the organizer. It was a lady, and she got right to the point. She said, "Are you a PowerPoint guy or are you a preacher?" Don't think I was startled for too long. I said, "Well, basically a PowerPoint guy, but I can go the other way if you want." Oh, she said, no. I knew what the problem was there. Sorry, Lori.
That's all right.
With the problem with the preachers, you never know when the end is. If you have the PowerPoint, you know how many slides in the package when you're halfway through, and you can stop yawning and that sort of thing. Anyway, I'm really pleased to be here today. I've looked forward to this opportunity to share some of my experiences with this group, and I very much subscribe to the objectives of the organization, so that's why I'm here today. Next. So that's really what my purpose is today, is to support the objectives of the society and in the process to recognize the contribution of individuals. We can work in the dark, doesn't matter. I mean, it shows up okay. And to the contribution of the collective groups, because there are contributions at both levels. So I can talk a little bit about that later. So let's jump right into it. One of the areas, I'd say that there's three areas that I was involved with in some way. One had to do with a look at a bit of genealogy or family heritage, and another one was preservation of artifacts, and in that case my main contribution would be to, I restored my father's first car, which is a 1919 Grey Dort Model Ace, which he bought new when he got out of the Army, First World War. I got it running on the road back in 1946 or 47, long before I was old enough to have a license. And then when I was retired and had the assets and the time, I did a full restoration, so I'll talk about that in a little more detail. The other thing was I made recordings of my mother. That was unplanned in a way because I was hoping it would be done professionally, to have a good oral record of someone like my mom, whose mind was crystal clear right to her last days. And she was born on the island, grew up, spent all her life here except a few years in Kingston. And so I was trying to get a professional associated with the university, hopefully, that could actually make this happen. But after about 6 months of trying and nothing had happened, I got concerned. So I said to my wife, Riggy, who's been deceased now almost a decade, I said, "You go and visit your family down in the Maritimes. I'll go up to Kingston and sit with my mom for an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, and maybe the evening too, and I'll capture some of these things." I was apprehensive about this, not because of the doing of it, but I'm a family. So I was afraid she'd pop up and say, "Oh, you've heard all this before." Well, in 5.5 hours of recording, it happened once, and I got her back on track in about 2 seconds. So it turned out to be good. And all that material is available and accessible to this organization or others. And I know that the archives at Queen's are interested, because I've spoken to the people there, and they're interested in any form of historical stuff. And as soon as I told them I had 5.5 hours of recording with the interview with my mom and what her age was and where she grew up, they send it. Okay. Now that was, just back up if you wouldn't mind, Anne-Marie, put you on the spot right away. I promise not to put her on the spot, but I will try. I'm just showing the link between myself, this is the living connection. And here we have, now I'll see what this worked. Oh yeah, it's Tom. These are people I all knew. This is my grandmother, Alum. Her maiden name was Dean. And this is my grandfather, Alum. He was sometimes, mostly on the island, called Tom. I always thought it was because he was a bit short in stature. I thought it might have been the Tom Thumb thing, but not true. When I found out his actual birth, it's actually William Thomas. It's Thomas William, actually, but he was always called, we always call him William. So, and here is the eldest of the family, my Uncle Nelson. That's Elaine's father. Most of you know Elaine Berry. Yeah. She couldn't make it today. I saw her down at the whip, and she said she just couldn't make it. Too bad. So that's my Uncle Nelson. This is my mom, Elsie. She didn't have a middle name, and that was one of the few complaints she had. She didn't have a middle name. Anyway, the others did. And this is my Uncle Leslie. So that's the living connection of people I actually knew and grew up with. Next. Now this is where my mom grew up. For those of you who know the area, it's not a concession road, but it'd be just off the 5th concession, and it's like I always thought it was just a long lane, but if you look at the map, it could have been a concession road. But anyway, this is where my mom is here, one of these here, and her grandmother is this lady. This is Dean. She's a dean, and her father, my mom's father, is here. Anyway, that's the connection. Now, the next picture shows a somewhat more, I wouldn't say idealized, but this is an interesting one. Notice that it's signed Iva, Germany. Now, I'm not too sure of this, but I think that Iva, Germany came to the island as a teacher, and I'm not sure if she married locally, but anyway, her husband was Harry, Germany, but they changed their name just at the beginning of World War II to a less controversial, shall we say, name. So I think they became Clarks. Somebody can correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure.
I went to school with them. They came up to the Ridge School and went to school with the Winston and Lawrence. Yeah, and then there was an older lad too. There was 3 boys. Yeah. That went up to the Ridge School with them.
So the chance, I suppose this might have been something like a wedding present for my mom. But anyway, it's a nice picture. And it was always on the wall there, so I've scanned these things and made these things all accessible, print them out. By the way, if I'm not easy to put off my stride in these presentations, and so I encourage and invite participation and comments. Thank you, Grant. That's exactly what I'm looking for today. But anyway, this is signed Iva, Germany, and it's a somewhat more idealized version, but at least it's got a good coat of paint, and it looks pretty good. My mother always referred to that, and that's what the title is, the old Dean Homestead. But I think if you consult some of the older maps, you'll see that I'm a little doubtful that it's the original Dean Homestead. I think the original Dean Homestead was up on the 5th concession. But you'd have to go looking around to see the evidence of earlier settlement, like wells and foundations and things like that, and I don't have enough time to do that. Next. Now, switch to the other side of my family. This is my father's family. This is George Keyes, who was a main participant in the building of the church right next door here. He was nominally a farmer, but in fact he was more an entrepreneur and a builder, a constructor, and so he had a lot to do with the construction of this, which was the Methodist Church. And this is a bit startling here, because this nice portrait is George Keyes, age 52, and Mariah Armstrong, age 22. Now, that's a little bit surprising. I'm sure even in the day it was probably surprising. It was such an age difference. But on the other hand, he was such a busy guy with his entrepreneurship and buildings and barns and churches and everything that maybe he just didn't have time for courtship. But anyway, he married, this I believe is 1891, I think. And they married and then he pursued building a family rather quickly. They had 4 children, which I'll just briefly mention, and then one child died in infancy. So that's it. So let's move on to the next. Now, his father, and this is about as far back as my family research goes, because I'm not a real researcher in the sense that people in this room are on genetics and genealogy, but it's interesting because this is Thomas Keyes, spelled K-E-Y-S, and he's in the Alexandria Cemetery, and when we were kids, of course, we'd go over there for cemetery cleanups, and we'd ask the wrong question. We'd say to our mom, well, why did grandfather spell his name that way? It's different than the father's. So, the wrong question. I mean, the question really should have been, why did my father spell his name differently than his father? But we never got the answer to that, and it's still a little puzzling to me, because when I look at the family record such as is available to me, I find that even in his children's family, they don't all spell the name the same way. Some of them do the one E and some the two. So I'm still as puzzled as ever. Next. Now his wife was Catherine McCormick, and these are from my father's side of the family, the original migrants from County Donegal in Northern Ireland. And so my father, the one, George Keyes, the one at 52 marrying Mariah Armstrong, age 22, he was a 6-week-old infant when they emigrated from Ireland, and I'm not sure which port they sailed from. It's one of those things, if I were really, really dedicated to genealogy and so forth, I would dig it out, but too many things to do, not enough time to do all this. But there is one person who has actually visited the island here and spoken to both Ken and Arthur. For people who don't know, they're my two brothers. And my sister Wynne is here today, by the way. I'll give her proper credit because I'm using some of her photographic material just a little later. By the way, I didn't go into details at the entry, but the overall plan here is I'm trying to stick to about a 40-minute presentation. I have about 25 or so slides, so I can't dawdle too long on any one. But if nobody's got a schedule to meet, then we'll stay here as long as it takes to get everybody involved in the process. Anyway, they emigrated in 1838, and they didn't come to Wolfe Island right away. They came to Prince Edward County. And George, my grandfather, who none of our children, my sister Wynne was born in 24, that's what sorry, I added a couple of years. Anyway, none of my family level knew my grandfather, so it's a little bit questionable to say a living link with that. With our grandmother, Keyes, certainly. She was a lady not to be trifled with. She wasn't unkind, but you behaved and you did what you were told when she was around. My mother was a different personality entirely. She got her way by being a little soft and pliant and appealed to a different side of your character. But my grandmother Keyes, she was much more of an authority figure. Anyway, the 4 children were born after him. They were all born in Prince Edward County. And again, if I took the time, one would have to look up the records, land transactions, and the census and so forth to see what they were doing up there in Prince Edward County. But the fact was, when my grandfather was about age 12, which would make it 1850, they came to Wolfe Island, and that's when the farm on the 9th concession was first occupied by George Keyes with one E and Catherine McCormick and family. And so my grandfather would have been just the age, some say it's 9, but 12 years approximately, the age when they first came to the island. So that's the longest connection on my father's side. Next. Now, I can't do much with this here, but this is a fine map if anybody who's interested. I've spent actually hours looking over this map, and because this is an approximately 1870 map, and I think it's full of interesting stuff. You're familiar with this, Brian?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Oh, good. Because hit letter T, again, there's a little commercial pitch here. This software we're using today is not a PowerPoint, and in spite of what I mentioned at the beginning of being a PowerPoint guy. This is actually a really nice little free software package called Faststone. And one of the things that I find is really remarkable about it is you can annotate to your heart's content. You get the letter T on the keyboard and up pops this screen, and I've literally got some with hundreds, even thousands of words. And it goes, for those people who are technical, it goes in the metadata of the film, or the picture, so it stays there. And I find it just marvelous. So, and you can see what I did. I took the time to go through inch by inch on this thing and find out which Thomas Sr., that's the one, the guy with the sideburns and was born in Ireland, and his children, George, William, Thomas, and John. And see where they had the property. 7th concession, West Half Lot 1, blah, 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 and so on. I mean, it's surprising that they had a lot of property. And that was this is 1870, and they only came to the island in 1850. So, and then I looked at, there was one piece of paper, I think maybe Brian gave it to me. It showed, it was called an agricultural census. And it showed that the property on the 9th concession 50 acres. It's actually 99 acres because there was a 1 acre allocation to the school, or at least something like that. Anyway, it means there was a lot of tree removals and stumps and rocks and things, because if they were at ground zero in 1850, comes to 1870, or the time of that map there, they must have removed a lot of stumps and trees and boulders. Next. Anyway, if for anybody, this is a download. You can download it from McGill. It's a project McGill University had, and it's now this. I'll just jump sideways a little bit here, because this is one of the children of George Keyes and Catherine McCormick. This is William Keyes, and just to make the connection, this is Elizabeth Fawcett over here. So there is a connection back 3 levels with the Fawcett's here. I knew there was some kind of connection, but I never really followed it up. So any Fawcett's or Fawcett connections here now? It's too bad. I was hoping maybe Kay would be here today, but anyway. Again, it's unfortunate, but even though this is written on the back, it identifies all the people in the picture, but it doesn't say which is which. Unfortunately, it was in my mother's stuff, and in her later life, she had a serious macular degeneration. And so by the time this picture surfaced and I was trying to collect information, she couldn't identify the individuals. So the only ones that were between Wynne and I have a pulse scan on this one to see, he would know. This almost certainly is Arthur Keyes. This is Mary Keyes. And this is, what is it? Who's that?
Ethel?
Ethel. Thelma? Elma?
Ethel.
Ethel, okay. Anyway, that's the first cut. But who is in the back? Now, it may turn out, if this gets posted, somebody of the line who's been a little more diligent may be able to say, oh great, this is so-and-so and so-and-so. That's good. Next. Now this again is jumping all around the place here, but this is my father's family. So here we have the eldest child, Laura. Then there's Wilmer Keyes. There's Wilmer Lane, you know where that is, off the 9th concession. And this is my father, John, and this is my uncle, Alan. So just from the age of the folks there, you can probably tell when it was made. It's probably 1905, something like that. Next. And this is later in life. And for those of you who may remember my father, I think there's a rather uncanny family relation. You take off the sideburns and the mustache and everything, that's my father's eyes, brows, and nose. So I mean, it's easy to recognize. And here's my father in his military uniform. So again, that places the thing in time, because my father went in, enlisted over in Bearfield. I saw one of those opportunities to look at military records on a short-term basis. There was his own handwriting, Keyes also. So he did his training at Petawawa in the Royal Canadian Horse Artillery, and the only other person who had an island connection in that group was Henry Davis, Leith's father. And he was in the same battalion as my father. And my father was on an embarkation leave in November 1918, and they said, don't come back, the war is over now. So he was probably disappointed as a young man who'd gone through these training period, but at least he didn't have to serve in the gas and the carnage of Europe in World War I. And again, these are just mature ones. This is my Aunt Laura, there's my Uncle Wilmer, there's my father John, this is Alan, and this, you can tell this lady shouldn't be trifled with. That's my grandmother Keyes. She was not unkind, far from it, but she was firm. You paid attention. And you can see, now you're beginning to see the age difference. This one, again, I know this picture had to be taken in 1918, so the timing is pretty accurate there. And he died, George here, he died in 21.
24.
24, I beg you. Somebody's been listening. Okay, next. Now I get to the part of the talk when I said my contribution to preserving things, artifacts, was my father's first car. So he bought this when he got out of the Army, First World War, and he always called it a 1918 Grey Dort, and he was technically probably correct, but on the official register of which the car is registered, it's 1919. And if I have the first license plate, the first marker on it. And if you move to the next one, here's my garage down in Magog, Quebec. And it's all in bits and pieces, so you can see it's kind of busy time. Here's the drivetrain and the axle and the brake and the frame and everything. But we hadn't yet got to actually doing the body work. And it shows out, it's not in the picture here, but the engine is on a dolly off to the right, because with this sort of thing, what I basically did, I did as much work as I could do myself, but one of my better characteristics is I know my limitations. So as soon as I got to something that was beyond my skill set and beyond my equipment, then I turned to the experts. Not acknowledged restoration experts, but just people who knew what the hell they were doing. And they did not let me down. And because it's an expensive project, I would have to say, because when I started, I said, oh, I'll just get the car back on the road. And I can do the engine myself and everything, no big challenge. I'm an engineer. But once you get in it, then I said, no, what I really want to do is refurbish the thing. I don't want to just make it run again. So then you can add a zero to the cost of the, you can add a decimal points to the cost of the restoration. But I don't regret it. The final job, you can see next. And that's the one I think was in your brochure.
From start to finish, then, or is that 2.5 to 3 years? How long? Roughly how long? 2 or 3 years?
Oh, the restoration. Yeah, thanks, Ron. The restoration period started in 2005, and the rollout, which is that picture right there, that is the day before I had the official rollout at my country place, and it didn't have the front fenders on. The top had never been put up yet. And when I got out to the end of the driveway, the rollout, and I turned the wheel hard over to turn right up the road, I only went to about a 45-degree angle. I was in such a hurry to put the steering assembly that I hadn't done the obvious thing. It was like a one turn out. Right. Really bad. But so next Monday morning, the guy who did the body work, the upholstery on the top, an excellent guy, absolutely excellent. He came along and helped me put up the top for the first time. And the young man who was doing the painting and the body work helped me put the fenders on the front and mount the bumper. And Tuesday morning, I took it up the road to show my neighbors. And when I got back in the driveway, it had 0.3 miles on the odometer.
Wow.
Now, I would have to tell people who might get in the restoration business, I had really hoped that I have about a 2-week clear period before it went in prime time. I had 0 time. So maybe not too surprising, on the first outing, I did have a breakdown. And just for those people who are technically oriented, the problem was so simple, you'll think I'm an idiot, and you're probably right. What happened after the first engine start, which my sister Wynn was there at the first engine start, you probably remember Wynn, and we were so busy congratulating each other and raising a beer and so on, we never torqued the head down.
Oh, dear.
There you go. Grant knows what we're talking about here. I mean, it's a stupid error. Yes.
What year was that?
I started the process in 2005, and the rollout, this was about June 3rd, 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a 5-year project.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I say. If you just wanted to get things back on the road, it would be like a 1-year project. But if you want to do it right, it's a 5-year project, and add a decimal point to your cost estimate. I don't have to tell you about that. Okay, next. Now, just to recreate, you've probably forgotten it by now because I'm moving more slowly than I had planned. This, for those who know Kingston, this is numbers 1 and 3, and a beautiful duplex on Emily Street, just off the corner of McDonald Park. I think it's McDonald Park, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, that picture, I won't force Anne-Marie to go back to the beginning, but you remember the original picture with my father? By the way, maybe it's worthwhile to see if you can go back 2 slides or so.
Oh, 2 slides, okay.
Because there's a little story. This one right here.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to recreate. I thought at the time that I knew where it was, and it wasn't until Ken and I went back about 2 years after I had made the initial guess at where it was, and we sat there. I might as well tell the whole story. We'd been told that Princess Auto was open on the day after Christmas. It wasn't. We didn't know that. So Ken and I went out to the Princess Auto, and it was closed. So they said, well, instead of just getting on the boat coming back, let's go down to Emily Street and see if we can look at this picture again. And when I don't know who came up with it, probably Ken, but anyway, he said, oh, we thought this was an awning over a window. And as soon as you say it could be an awning over the other duplex entry, then everything fell into place. So the first guess was actually right. So one of my objectives, now we can go forward back to the next one. Yeah, that one. Now this was taken only about 3 weeks ago because I had the car out and Dean was had a closed trailer, and if he's not around to defend himself, so I can blame him shamelessly because I was relying on him to bring the car today and have it parked out here, but he's busy moving boats and things. So I spoke to him this morning, but I could have gone out and do it, but I decided not. My job is to hand wave and make a talk here today. So, but the car is there; it's in running condition, and one of the objectives is to make it available for this community, for anything that it would be of value and help to this organization, and as well as families supporting them. Yes.
Are there any other cars the same model in existence?
Well, this is a bit unusual because it was a sort of high end of what they called the class of the light car field. The Great Ort had that reputation. And there's one, in fact, the professional who restored it, Stan Ewer, that's his business, restoring cars. He restored a Great Ort Ace, and before he started, he knew of mine, and he and his wife and his client came down to my place in the eastern townships of Quebec, and he spent a day intensively going over mine. So his restoration was based on my unrestored car before I started restoring it. And so I owe him a few credits, but he owes me a few too, because he was able to make as good a restoration. That car, that particular car, which I'm probably one of the very few people who's had a ride in it when it was fully restored, but it was sold to the Reynolds Museum in Wetaskiwin, Alberta. And so I've had friends who've been in that museum, and they brought back pictures, and I said, yeah, I'm one of the few people who can say I rode in that car. I even commented to Stan that had one of his wheels was out around, because I'm sitting in the back and a little bit of this going on. And to my astonishment, when I pointed it out to him, he said, well, I never drove the car. I was flabbergasted. I mean, here's a guy paying big money for this restoration. The unfortunate thing was he and his client had a bit of a falling out. So it's the sort of thing that happens because Stan it's what happens when you have two strong personalities that don't see things in the same way. I mean, that's just a human being. His client was a wealthy man, and Stan wanted to have it exactly like mine was, but the client says, no, I'm not paying for that. I mean, he'd already invested quite a lot. But that's the sort of thing that's happened. So the two were in conflict. And so it broke up a perfectly good relationship. But it's now well preserved. So to answer the question, there are only 4 known to exist. Mine is the only one that I say is in full, and I would say without with complete lack of modesty, I don't think there's another Great Ort, either this model or any other, who's as close to the original as this is. Anything that's humanly possible to make it as per original, it's there. So there's no improved designs, there's no substitutions, and that would have been very easy to do. That's the one without the decimal point, correct? If you do it the easy way. Okay, next. Oh, just so you know where that is, this is just turning 180 degrees from where I took the picture. And this is the little pavilion, the Martello Tower, just opposite the park, is over here. And this is looking out onto Lake Ontario. Okay. Now that's the only picture known to exist of my father and mother, John Keyes and Elsie Allen. And when I looked at this thing with a bit of a magnifying glass, I see a car wheel here. And it's a wire wheel. Now, how many wire wheel cars in 1921 were there on Wolfe Island? Not many, I would think. So the chances are that was that same car there. And but unfortunately, I never asked my mother during my interviews where the reception was. Where did they get married? That's one of the disadvantages of being a family member conducting an interview. You can't ask intimate questions, of course. An impartial third party might get away with it, but I mean, I'm family, so I'm not going to ask pertinent or impertinent questions. But anyway, that's the only picture of my parents. Okay, let's move along. Now, they produced 4 children, and even though I was around, I was apparently a terrible cut-up. In fact, my mother said, "You were a holy terror." And I used to kind of tease her a little bit. I was saying, "Yeah, but I turned out okay, Mom." She said she was the only one of the children she had to whip. So I said, guilt there. Guilt is a powerful force. So I kind of teased my mom. Said, "It's okay, Mom, I worked out okay." So, but here, in case you didn't recognize, Winifred, right here. Win. Arthur, who is hoping to be here today, but he's not. Ken, who is here. And they grafted me in later from a horrible photo, but anyway, I was cut up and was not fit to be left in the photo session, so they turned me out.
Better tell them.
Okay, now here.
Tell them why the haircut.
The haircut?
Yeah.
Well, you mean you're talking the bangs?
No, the top of my head where you cut my hair off.
I don't know anything about that. There it is, he's been harboring this. Yeah, I think there might have been a little experimentation with Thanks, Anne-Marie, you got the hang of it there. Next. Now, this is interesting because now, if Elaine were here, as far as I know, this is from Elaine, my cousin Elaine, Alum Berry. She couldn't make the unfortunate. She's got a marvelous collection of pictures, thousands, and I certainly hope they get preserved in some way. But I've been unsuccessful in trying to scan them because I have quite a lot of experience in that. In my own personal collection, from which this is drawn, I have something like 12,000 images, and all scanned in reasonable good quality. Now this, I can't put a date on this, but for sure, it's the first picture I obtained. This is my father, John, and this is his 1927 Model D John Deere, and this is a George White thrashing machine. And according to, I think it's on my interview with my mom, apparently on his way home from picking the thing up, I had some question, how on earth did he get that thing on the old paddle wheeler, the Wolfe Islander 1? I don't know, I don't remember that you couldn't drive it on like that. So that's a little bit of a puzzle. But anyway, this could very well have been on the way home from the delivery. If not, it was certainly very early in its life, because my father used to do a little bit of custom thrashing with that machine, and you can imagine, even on gravel roads, how comfortable it was on those. In fact, I've actually driven that actual setup. My father trusted us kids to know enough about machinery. If he'd say, "Well, drive this down the road there." So, but I'm telling you, when you were rattling along with those lugged steel wheels, you learned how to stand on the bar at the back on the balls of your feet to absorb some of the shock. Otherwise, I mean, you got it real shaky. But anyway, that ran until the war years, and then my father, who would have planned, I think, to upgrade the tractor at least, you simply couldn't get them during the war years. So that. Now I'll show another one. The next one. That was the first picture. The one before was the first picture I had of the thrashing machine and tractor, and this is the last time I personally saw the thing in use. So this is done. Now Oscar McCready was a bit conservative, and he did not go along with combining and so forth. So here we have, I think this is a 1959 picture, And this is the George Wright thrashing machine. I'm not too sure because it doesn't show in the picture what tractor was used. It may have even been Oscar's own Fordson, but it would have a very tough time with this kind of machine. But I think Oscar actually had a pulley arrangement on his Fordson. But if it wasn't that, then it was my father's tractor. So here's my dad, John, here. This is Winston McCready pitching off sheaves onto the machine. And guess who's up in the loft? That'd be Oscar. A miserable job, of course. Imagine blowing dusty straw and everything up in the mow of the barn. That was an unenviable job, I can tell you. I never had to do it, but usually the owner did the dirty stuff. So that was really dirty. But of course it was convenient. If you had enough mow space, then it was easy to put down the bedding. You had a whole mouthful of good straw. Sometimes, for whatever reason, sometimes Oscar just made a big straw stack, which he would burn. That makes a nice celebration. I don't know whether that was common, but that was what he did, I know.
That looks like Eldon, though, on the left there, the striped shirt.
No, this is Winston. This is the one who's pitching.
That guy right there. Yeah, that was.
Oh, no, sorry. That's my friend Ian McDonald, one of my classmates.
Oh.
Yeah. No, he's a good friend and classmate, but he died much too early. He died in 1983.
Okay.
And who owns the truck?
Oh, well, this is my dad's truck. By the way, I was expecting somebody to identify
It looks like
it.
a 59, all right.
Well, that would match your recollection.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Would that be Herb Armstrong on the
By the way,
side?
the colors are not as good as they might be because this is a rolled film, which I fortunately used very little of. A lousy film.
Now, your neighbor across the road had something like that too.
George
George
Rogers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be. That could be, yeah.
Could have been his truck?
I don't have a picture. No, this is not George. This is my father's here, for sure. When you mentioned George Rogers, I can remember what he had. He had something like a 34 Plymouth coupe. And it had a system which I'm sort of familiar with because in effect the Grey Door has something similar. There was a big knob in the panel and it said freewheeling in. And what did that do? It was like an overrunning clutch, so it means your engine did not provide any braking. Well, that's not necessarily a good thing, as I know very well, because that's the way the Grey Door is relatively conventional in many ways. The one thing that is unconventional is the left-hand pedal is a clutch. First half of the travel disengages the clutch, and the next half of the travel engages an external contracting set of bands on the rear drums. And the right-hand pedal operates like something like an emergency brake of the 1960s era, where you press it down and it ratchets, and it stays on. It's like a parking brake or emergency brake. And this freewheeling thing that is on George's sedan, not sedan, but coupe, was exactly that. Most people did not use it because it's better to get a little engine braking. Anyway, that was the last picture of the thrashing machine. The era was 1959. Now this is where I grew up. The people who know the house would say, "Oh, look at the veranda," and it is. In a way, it's kind of handsome looking, but it was a real haven for the spiders. And my grandmother Keyes, who was always annoyed at the robins who were making nests there, so she'd destroy them and they'd rebuild them. So it was a constant battle. So eventually, what with urging from Geneva as well, it was eventually taken down. So what you see now is that without the veranda. It looks good, but it is a high maintenance item. Next. By the way, I haven't given proper credit all around, but when I said that I was using family album material, I drew on material from my sister Wynne, and also from my mom. I'll get there eventually. I'm sorry I'm running a bit slower than I planned to, but we're not on a tight schedule. So let me go back. Oh, by the way, so there's albums from my mother in her teen years, from my sister Wynne in her teenage years, and also to my great surprise, when I was here only a month or so ago, I was explaining this to Arthur, and he said, "Well, I have an album too." I was startled because I never remember seeing with the camera's hands ever. And when I got the album, I said, "Well, can I have the album?" Yes. So I've scanned it. but I haven't had a chance to really digest it or annotate it yet, Henry, but it's there, it's available. Now here, I don't know how many people would recognize, probably not many, but this is where I went to school first, and this is the first teacher, Wyona Horn.
Oh, my goodness.
And that is not me, but that's my cousin Glenn. That's the eldest son of Wilmer. And next, this is from Wynn's album. Now I don't know. I've never asked you, Wynn, to see if we can identify all the people in there. But by the way, I have these things printed out, so later on, if you want to look back at any one specific slide that show, they're all here. We'll put them out on the table if you want. Don't drip coffee on them. Okay, next. Unfortunately, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I mean, this is what happens when you don't pay enough attention to heritage items. This fine specimen, I'm sure the only stone school on Wolfe Island, has been allowed to fall into this miserable condition because of lack of attention from various levels. But anyway, that's just a little bit of a moral lesson here. If you're going to pay attention to your heritage, you have to work at it a bit. Next. Now, to show that I'm a real Wolfe Islander, I thought I'd throw in some pictures of the people that I grew up with. So I doubt if too many people will be able to recognize everyone here, but this is Basil O'Brien, this is me, and this is Winfield Woodman.
Oh, for God's sakes. Yeah.
Next. Now again, that's Winfield a little later.
Yeah.
And I was hoping he and Jeanette might be here today, but they're not, obviously. Next. Now, some may remember this, but of course, one of my important influences on my technical upbringing was Charlie Fitzgerald, who was the transmitter operator, engineer, whatever you want to call him, up at CKWS. That was the transmitters were up on the 5th concession, just off the front road. And Charlie was quite a remarkable person. I can't help but reminisce a bit because Charlie was thoroughly dedicated to things technical. And he grabbed onto me because he knew I had certain technical predilections, and he was an important influence on me. And he knew enough about not overloading me with difficult assignments, but he knew enough to give me achievable goals. And so I did a lot of things as a very young person that helped me get oriented. And the only time I ignored his advice when I told him I was going on to university, he tried to dissuade me from that. No, you know too much about this thing. You can get a good job right away. Somehow I was smart enough to ignore that advice, and I went on, and I just celebrated my 65th anniversary of my engineering graduation, and I never regretted it. I had an interesting and challenging career, so I have no complaints.
Lorne,
So this is Francis.
You should tell them, Lorne, I think you built yourself a television when you were just a young lad in your engineering.
Let's put a little more accurate pitch on it, Grant. I'm not saying you're exaggerating. Thank you for the flattery. But it's true. I built a TV set in 1952 when there really weren't many on the island.
Right. Yeah.
And my father, I should have thrown a picture in there, but I asked my father rather gently if he could put up a tower for the thing, because I knew enough about my engineering. At that point I was in second year of engineering. And so he and Arthur, and to a lesser extent my Uncle Alan, took down the windmill, which I assume they got proper authority, but I wouldn't be sure.
Okay.
On what we call the Charlie Ryan property, right down the corner, the baseline and the 9th concession, at Charlie Ryan Place.
Yeah.
And he was long gone, and it was abandoned. And I have to assume that my father, who did things properly usually, always I think, they brought it down and put it back up. I mean, it was quite remarkable because I was in full speed in my studies and I could only come home for a half a day on a weekend or something like that. But they got it up, and eventually I made antennas, and because of the good location and the high level, and I played around with a bunch of antennas, they could get 3 channels when everybody else now could get only 2.
Yeah. That's right.
And I remember Captain Joe Sisti coming out. He hardly said a word. He was could be a pretty quiet guy, but
Yeah.
he came out there, my dad wanted to show off the
Yes,
smarts that his son did or something. So he came out to look at this TV, and there weren't too many TVs around then. And I must say, it was a good picture because it was a high quality set. And somewhere in my basement, I still have it.
Oh.
I don't know who on earth would want the thing now. But it ran for years, and it was, in a way, very important to my mom because it gave her a window on the world that she didn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
And so it ran for years and years without a cabinet. and I even had a voltmeter set up so that you could get an idea of the signal. The excuse I used was that, well, if the picture isn't good, all you have to do is look at this meter. If it's too far down this way, it means there isn't enough signal. So my mom would do it every time I came home. She'd say, well, the signal is down here half the time. It was amazing. Okay, so this is Frances Fitzgerald. I knew these girls. And the next one is her sister, Lois. Both gone now, unfortunately. And they were the children of Charlie Fitzgerald and Estelle. And they were very good to me, and I knew these young ladies very well. Next. Well, here's someone that, anybody know who that is? Linda Fawcett, who died about, 2-3 years ago. I had a chance to meet her after her husband died, and she was in modest decline at that time. It was really unfortunate, but we had a nice evening together in a couple of occasions. Anyway, an attractive and popular young lady, Linda Fawcett. Next. Now this one I showed at the Anglican Church supper. I think, Ken, you must have been there. But I showed this, Kay Fawcett was on the desk coming in there. And he saw this, he jumped right into his chair and went back in the kitchen to get Connie to show her this picture. Leave it at the regular size, Anne-Marie, and see how yeah. I won't put you through the ringers too much. That's me. I thought I was bigger than that, actually. This is Kay Fawcett, Doug Niles, Reg Greenwood, Ken Keyes, and Dick Hogan. Dick Hogan, I remember, was my seatmate, and I always had a kind of a soft spot for. He was good. He liked the Hogans. He had a good sense of humor. And I went to school with Sheila as well. And Sheila Hogan married one of my classmates, Mo Jakowick. I saw him yesterday. He was at the reunion. So, in fact, around 1970, when the General Wolfe was still a reasonable and going concern, I had the nerve to offer it as a place for the class dinner on a Saturday night, and it turned out very well. So it gave an opportunity for Sheila and I to kind of ham it up a bit, because we were Wolfe Islanders. We'd gone to school together, and here I had the classmates. So the classmates remember that. They said, oh, that was a fine time. We remember that, going over in the ferry and having a nice supper. So that was a good night. Anyway, that needs a little bit of photoshopping, because you can see Reg there. This thing, I don't know, was in my billfold or something and probably got cracked up. Next. Now, this isn't exactly ancient history, but for people who know your farming equipment, this is my dad on the McCormick Deering W6. When originally delivered, it was on steel, but after about 1 year, finally rubber became available, and so it was converted to rubber. And this is one of the early versions of a press. Now, this thing had a power takeoff, but it did not have the dual mode one with a ground power, ground speed, or whatever you call it. In other words, it was not practical. And it had its own, I think it was a Wisconsin V2.
V4. Yeah, it's a V4.
It was a 4, was
Yeah,
it?
we got one like that.
All I know, it was a bit of a swine to start.
Oh, yeah, when she's hot, yeah. Well, Frank will tell you, it's just about impossible.
Was that the one that you loaned us the battery off?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, okay, I won't go into that. Take too much time. I've already run way over the schedule.
Yeah. I
But
think
when-
I started.
Had trouble with the clutch on the gray door.
Oh, yeah.
And wound up at Frank's place. It was because he had the lift. Took the transmission out. Long story.
Henry, yeah.
Henry. Oh, yes. Right. Sorry. At Henry's place. And Dean was in on that. So anyway, that was a bit of an unexpected thing, because the leather let go, which is saying, I'm far from perfect. And one of the things was that instead of changing the 100-year-old leather, when I had the thing all in bits and pieces out on the bench, I said, that looks pretty good. I'll put it back in. Wrong choice. Anyway, that's Anyway, we got things back together and wanted to start it up. We said, oh, the battery's dead. A 6-volt battery. Where do you get a 6-volt battery? Well, just a minute. Maybe Grant has one. You got the call.
Yeah.
So we went up there, and you had a machine of this era
That's right.
with a 6-volt battery in it. You even showed that it worked.
Yeah.
Started it up.
Yeah.
Anyway, just out of curiosity, now where this is, I have to explain. When I took this picture, it was with a modest telephoto effect, so that this Carlton Island and the St. Lawrence isn't really that close, because this is like taken at the corner. This is on what we would call the Grant Place, and it would just be like the corner of the night pasture next to the home. The ninth concession would be just along here. And you can see, even in this 1961 picture, the elms, good ones here, dead ones there. This is Arthur, this is my dad, and I don't know who that is, and even Arthur couldn't remember. But anyway, that's a bit of old style, well, the first horizontal mobile hay presses are around. Next. Now this is interesting. I deliberately left this in here. Pressing, February 15th, 1919. This is out of my mother's teenage album. And I did that because I thought it was interesting, and I think there's a lot to be done now. I realize, Grant, that you were in the process of restoring that, and I said, I think you can pick up some details from that. And I think it's worth, and we made your prints, you're okay.
Yep.
But maybe this is one. Now here you can see the essence of it. Now this guy with the flat hat on, I think he's there for a photo op. I don't think he's And there's a guy peeking around here, but you basically see the full crew. Now I don't know who that is, but it could very well be one of the Hogans or something who had a vertical hay press. But you can see how it works. It's vertical. I can see a big arm like a piston arm here, and I see a character here. Okay, you can see the jumpers. There will be hay mows on both sides. Now you might pitch hay onto these platforms from one side or the other side or both. But basically what you do, you stuff hay down this tube here, and then the jumpers literally jump on the stuff, and they do the best they can to pack it down. And when it gets up to the full level, you basically put a platen in on the top. That is a flat, big, heavy piece of oak with slots in it. And these, I didn't bring it along, but I made what I thought was my version of how this thing really worked. But I didn't bring it along, unfortunately. But I reckon I know how the pulleys and everything work now.
Good.
Anyway, the whole point is to think in terms of like a piston engine, those of you who are mechanically inclined. Except I think this machine probably has 2 connecting rods.
They're called followers. That white thing you see on this side, Lord, is a follower. There's another one on the other side. See that white arm going into the center? Okay, there's 2 of them, one on each side. And they're on a track with wheels on them. And the cable pulls them together at the same time to shove your plunger. Yeah.
Exactly right. That's, all I did is I sketched it out saying, I got to figure out how this thing works. And so I did to my own satisfaction, said, yeah, I have a sketch saying how I think it works. But anyway, I can remember on the one occasion when I saw a vertical hay press working. It was on the family farm, and I didn't realize until later when I read something that my Uncle Wilmer had written, and he talks about John's hay press. I didn't know my father had a hay press. And so only a few weeks ago when I was talking to Art and I was saying what I was doing and about the albums, I got 2 surprises. One was he said he had an album himself, which I was unaware, as I said before, that he even had a camera in his hands. So I have that album and it's all scanned. The other thing was Art started rhyming off who the people on the island were that had hay presses. And I said, why don't you write that down? Because I think Grant might be interested in knowing who else. You might rummage around through the grass and find some bits and pieces. So he was rhyming off. I said, whoa, stop, because he had about half a dozen people who all had vertical hay presses. You may know that all now.
Well, Johnny O'Shea and Leo Green were some of the guys that worked with them quite extensively. Yeah, there were 8 or 10 of them.
Oh yeah, that's right. I mean, Art started rhyming them off. There was this and that and the other.
We're down to 2. We're just about done.
Anyway, that's important. I mean, it's only a small thing, but it's the sort of thing when you get into the heritage business. How many people know that? Not many. My brother Art, maybe a handful, maybe Johnny. Where's Johnny? Anyway, he's back there. Maybe Johnny knows about it. But anyway. But one thing I noticed right away They surely didn't want, there's a lot of tension there. Horses are on what is called a sweep. This would be a light team, and they circulate in an anti-clockwise direction, and there's a cable wound around the, I'd call it a capstan, but notice there's a hell of a lot of limestone there. They don't want this thing to flip up in the air. So I'm saying you'd have to be careful with the alignment of that thing, because there could be a big uplifting force there. So they didn't fool around. There was a lot of rocks on there.
Yeah.
But these would be like tracks coming out this way, and like I was saying, there'd be like a dolly with 4 wheels on it, and then 2 pistons. I would call them, in terms of automotive stuff, 2 connecting rods that come up and push on. Anyway, that's from my mom, 1950. And what were they doing with it? Notice February the 15th, I don't see much snow on the ground. Next. Now here's what they were doing. I cannot apologize for the quality of this, but it's real. Havey, same day, 1918. And here's what they did. These bales, I'd be guessing a bit, but I would say over 200 pounds. Just a guess. And you can see they'd load them up on sleighs and take them either to Kingston or Cape Vincent. Because there was a market in 1918, there was a market for loose hay or baled hay right up to the beginning of World War II, and there were still bread and milk deliveries with single horses. Next. Now this is courtesy Elaine, so full credit. And I can line them off because I've read again, just as an aid memoir, just to show up. If you hit letter T, you annotate. And here it says, hay pressing on Wolfe Island, 1945, Elaine Allen Berry collection. Everett Hogan, Tom Hogan, Leslie Allen. Well, you can go on. You can close that. You can move it around out of the way if you want, but it doesn't matter. Charlie McRae, Nelson Allen, Justin Payne, and
Clifton Fargo.
Clifton.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you look at that picture, there's only one person still living, and that's
Ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I recommended whoever is working on this try and get an interview with Everett, because that's when he survived. Next. Anyway, I don't know whether that's helpful at all, but you can see a slightly different thing. Oh, back up one, would you, Henry? I noticed this thing. It looks.
That's the weigh scales.
It's a weigh scale, but it might just be a way of handling a real heavy load, because I looked at the lever arms here. It's maybe about 4 or 5 to 1, so a 100-pound, 150-pound guy could probably lift a 250-pound bale. Maybe they use it for loading wagons.
Leo Greenwood gave us his. His scales is exactly like that. You slide it along a slide to wherever you think.
To get the weight.
And to get the weight, and then you pull the handle down, and you can tell, if that's right, it was 200 or 210 pounds. Then you put a slip on each bale. Everett Hogan explained it all to us. Everett and Leo Greenwood, of course, Leo had one and used it 30 years ago.
Oh, that's pretty recent.
Matches, so he knows them inside out.
Good. Anyway, you're on the track. I know that's good. Next. Now again, I personally never owned a camera until 1951.
Wow.
And then I started shooting black and white, so you can recognize the Wolfe Islander here with this ramp with no electric or hydraulic lift. It was crank it up by hand and then release the thing. Unfortunately, there was one rather nasty accident with the thing being dropped too soon. And you can see it was high water. This would be 1951. So you can see pretty high water here. And you can look and see what kind of cars were. There'd be fairly modern cars. And I can't remember when these new blocks were built, but that's definitely just post-war, I think. And of course, in the days when they were running the landing craft, they would land up here next to the Bryceland garage. They'd go up here. Next. And it was a good place to trim it. You can see high water mark there. And when I used to take the Grey Dort and go to work up at the radio station, I'd quite often stop for a quick dip in the summertime, and there would be usually Des McDonald and Sheila LaRush go swimming with me. Names familiar?
Yeah.
Good. It was nice after a day in the hay to have a quick dip there too. And it just, since nobody's around and wrap my knuckles, the other thing was you'd wait until the boat has sprung around the corner and then they go to full speed forward. You got a real nice flushing action. You dive in there, you get whipped back. There was also the unfortunate possibility you would get sucked into the prop too. It didn't happen. I'm here. Next. Now this is a Winfield Woodman, Bruce Devine restoration. Again, I wanted to draw attention to people who take these individual initiatives. And this is the Stanley Woodman's Minnehaha. And this is the stern here. You can see, I'm not sure I ever had a ride in this. Maybe yes, maybe no. But you can see here's a stern post here and lanyards for doing the steering. And of course, the skipper would be here, his guided parties would be here, and Stanley would use that for fishing, guiding fishing. He knew the waters very well, and so there were a lot of people who came around to the Woodman Lodge there, and they would get some good bass fishing or whatever. And muskie as well, too. Next. Now this, don't have to explain this too much. This is what Grant calls the Abbott Place, and I've been out there many times. And here he is with his grandson. And this was probably taken about 3 or 4 years ago. And so again, credit to Grant for taking some of his time and assets to maintain and restore this machinery and to make it available to the public. So that's much to his credit. Next. Now these are pictures I took about 3 years ago when you had a plowing match out there. And you asked me to bring along the Great Orc, which I did. And I thought it was a static display, but then said, well, go and pick up these VIPs from the boat. So I wound up shuttling VIPs back and forth from the plowing match site to the ferry boat. But they got a hoot out of driving in this 1919 car. I like this picture. I missed the donkey one. It was a donkey. What's going on here, by the way? He's got, it looks like a yardstick or a plumb bob or something. What's he doing?
Not sure.
Nobody knows. He's having fun anyway. I remember this particular team. They were a nice-looking team, kind of light, but the one was obviously highly experienced and plodded one foot after the other in the furrow. The other one was having more trouble with dancing back and forth from one to the other. Next.
Frank, yeah. Frank.
Recognize anyone there?
Yeah, that's Frank.
That's good. Well, this was, of course, I showed it. It was towed by tractor, of course, and in my era, it was usually 3-horse. And I remember even my father, who was usually pretty good, made a mistake one time and got the even or the wrong way around, and this poor lightweight mare that was trying to pull the whole darn thing.
Oh.
He had the even or on the wrong way.
Oh, dear.
You recognize after a while this horse wasn't lazy or crazy or something, so he made it right. The poor thing was really trying. Next. Now, whose machine is this?
It's been through about 6 different people. Frank ended up giving it to us, so it's at our place now.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's not the Vinnie Johnson one, is it?
No. This
Okay.
isn't the Vinnie Johnson.
No,
Well-
it was,
Oh God.
Marvin Antoine.
Marvin Antoine
Yeah,
had
Marvin Antoine.
way back.
He was a good friend of Gene Hilton years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there's no reason why Dad's machine, if it had been stored indoors,
That's 1929.
that's a 29, Dad's would be a 27.
That's all wood.
Yeah. Your dad.
And I know where it is, but unfortunately I just haven't taken the time to do it. It would be overgrown with vines and grasses and weeds and everything. But it's on what used to be, well, I'm sure it was Oscar McCrady's farm eventually, but I think it used to be his father's farm.
Yeah.
And that's where it wound up there. And
I
it's,
went to look at it when I first got back, because I was told all the belts were in the roller housing.
yes, it should
They
be.
were all in there rotten.
Oh, well, small wonder.
Yeah.
But I know exactly what you mean because, well, okay, I wasn't much of a contributor, but I mean, we were expected to know how to handle ourselves around the thrashing machine and the tractor. That's one thing most farm lads do. They get a sense of responsibility. You're driving a piece of heavy equipment. You don't do stupid things with it. And you were also expected to be able to take belts on and off. And it was It was interesting. One thing I remember most clearly, the straw on the galvanized steel made an incredibly slippery combination. You really had to watch yourself here. You were standing around on the top of that machine, and it's vibrating and shaking. I mean, you could have slipped and fallen on a belt or fallen right off the machine. Not easy. Next. This is from Wynn's collection, and not too many. Anybody recognize? This was a ship that I think the Horns bought somewhere down in Quebec, from the name it sounds it might be. I think, but this is only a speculation, that they bought it in the anticipation they would get an operating license, provided service direct from Cape Vincent to Kingston. But they didn't. So they sold this thing. So that's a fairly rare picture and taken by my sister Wynn.
She's still running today.
Is it running?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, but I should defer to the expert.
Yeah, Lorne
Excellent.
wouldn't recognize her, but I tied up alongside. And she's a big cruise ship now, and then been refurbished in Quebec. So
Amazing.
she's coming out shortly. And
Well, what was the prime mover on? What was the... what
she was a
the-
ferry.
No, but what was the motive power?
Oh, long
steam?
gone now.
It wasn't steam, probably diesel now or something.
I think she was diesel even then.
It may have been diesel then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Johnny,
Anyway,
John knows.
that's a fairly rare picture, I reckon.
Lorne, John knows what was on it originally.
A pair of two-cylinder Fairbanks Morris reversible engines.
Okay.
Oh, okay, there you are. Very good.
It served as a ferry here for 6 weeks. About 1937, 38, while they were putting a new bottom in the Wolfe Island.
Interesting. Well, there you are.
And she's still the Jacques Cartier.
Well,
That
it
name
is.
was never
Well,
changed.
that's interesting because these things change names so often. Next. I like this picture. This is one, again, from Wynn's collection. It's of her class. Now, it'd be interesting if you want to take it as a challenge. The pictures will be out on the bench here if you want to look at it in detail. But Wynn was able to... I was surprised myself. I identified about half in there. It's the first time I saw the picture. And Wynn came along and identified all but about 3 or 4. And then I spoke to Mabel Greenwood McCrae, and she filled in a name. And the one that was really quite difficult was this one, who turned out to be O'Brien?
Gerald O'Brien?
Gerald O'Brien. Yeah. Now the others, I could rattle them off there, but it's interesting. I was even surprised myself. Oh, Mabel is here.
Yeah.
That's Mabel there. This is Dorothy Kane, Goldie Fawcett, Mildred Boyd. Here's Wynn, Preston Connolly. Who's this?
Donald McDonald.
Kind of recognizable, isn't he? Hard to not recognize him. Fran Whitmarsh, Inda, my cousin Keith, Doreen, another cousin, so on and so forth. But anyway, it's fun, and lots of interesting. So that's from Wynn's collection. Next.
What school is that?
Oh, the continuation school down at the edge of the village, which was a 2-room school, grades 1 to 8 on one side, and grades 9 and 10. And that's where I went and Wynn went. So I've blathered enough. And what I want to do now, the third thing that I mentioned was interviews with my mom. But before I do that, I just want to say, I started out saying I wanted to recognize the individual contributions and the kind of collective contributions made by members of this society and people with other groupings. And that's really the purpose of my presentation today. So I didn't even mention all the names, but there's Jean Tarrant I found to my surprise some years ago that was restoring old ploughs and things like that. Great initiative. And then there's Billy Bolton doing boats. I've already referred to Winfield and Bruce doing the restoration of Minnehaha. And Grant, your work with antique machinery, including the hay press and the tractors and everything, great stuff. And then I talk about like Brian McDonald doing historical research, formidable effort there. Couldn't possibly match that. And Anne-Marie here, who's so helpful today. I mean, I was blown away when I looked at your McDonald McHugh family tree. She's got 12,000 name entries in her tree. I think it's got to be the Wolfe Island family tree, basically.
Wow.
I mean, Mine, I started out, I'm up to 800. An amateur. But other things. I mean, there's Brian Johnson here. I mean, a great asset to the organization because he's familiar with modern comedians, a good communicator. He writes, maybe not enough according to some people. I won't add my voice into that one. Fine. Anyway, Brian Johnson, you're using modern social media. It's so important these days. If you can't feel comfortable with the web and all the Twitters and all of that stuff, you're bad luck. And then there's Barbara Wall-Laurent with the Legacy and so on, a fine piece of penmanship. And even the ones that don't get specific mention, every volunteer who helps out at a meeting like this or other ones, they should be complimented, encouraged and complimented. Next. And then, of course, there's the more collective one, this organization, for example. The establishment of the society itself is important, and the publication at Windward, the Old House Museum, the Scene of the Crime Festival, these are all good initiatives that preserve some of the Wolfhound heritage. And all the things that you still do, plowing matches, antique farm equipment, the softball tournaments, all these things help to foster the feeling of community and the importance of the heritage. And the one thing, I just leave it hanging in the air. There's a couple of areas that I'd like to see explored a bit. In the pioneer days, stump pullers and boulder removers must have been pretty important pieces of equipment. And I haven't seen anything about them, but Art knew a little bit. He described something with great big wheels that you used to lift the stones so you could, but the smaller stuff was done with stone bolts. Now, Shauna, if you could be so good, just to explain, as I told about the interviews with my mom, which I hoped would be done professionally, but I wound up doing myself, just to show you how awkward and stumbling a process might be, but ultimately satisfying. First interview with my mom.
Well, maybe some of you were asking today what some of the questions would be. Well, as I said today, some of the things I want to get, maybe just some of the stories that you've already told us many times probably, but nobody's written them down or recorded them or anything, so it's always nice to be able to catch those. But if
you know the story about when Wynne was born, eh?
I should go ahead. I mean, you can talk about it. What I was going to say, maybe some of the things about your own.
That's history.
Yeah, your own early life, which nobody else would be able to comment on.
Nobody around to tell on me either.
No, you can exaggerate.
I can lie or do anything. No, you see, when Wynne was born is when we had the big snowstorm. Dad had the field of grain half sowed between the schools. They nearly buried the drill in the fields.
Was this between the house and the school?
Yeah. And that was Easter Thursday. He was born the 17th of April. That was Easter Thursday. And it snowed all that night, I guess, and all day Friday. And they buried the drill in the fields, and Uncle Nelson and Aunt Ella came down Sunday to see the baby. They had to come with a horse and cut her. She was out walking. She was afraid of getting upset. There was
Was Wynne born at home?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But
was Grandma Keyes with me.
Was she the midwife?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was quite satisfied to have her. Then I had to go to the town for you and Ken, and I didn't like that. Oh, I had my legs turned up to the ceiling. I didn't know that. I didn't know what to expect. The two had been born at home, and it was just in the bed, and the cooks pushed back, and everything very thorough.
Well, Grandma Keyes was fairly experienced, though, as a midwife, wasn't she?
Well, she was with Evelyn McCready or Winston, I don't know which it was, and well, they did that. Grandma Keeley did that all around, for people.
So Grandma Keyes wasn't really that experienced as a midwife?
No, she never took any course or anything, no. You just did it. It was a neighborly act.
Oh, yeah.
But Grandma Keeley, she did that a lot. Now, she was with your dad.
But wouldn't at that time that Wynne was born, there was a local doctor then, though?
Yeah, Dr. Spanky.
Dr. Spanky. But wouldn't he normally come for a birth?
He brought, oh, yes. Yeah, he delivered Wynne and Arthur.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And he delivered your father. but he didn't deliver me. Mother, for some reason, she never doctored with Dr. Spanky. I don't know why, whether she just didn't like him. He was a little bit fresh with the storekeeper's wife, and I didn't know. But he was a great doctor.
That's it. One more picture with a little tip to Brian. A few people go online and see some of Brian's almost daily postings, which are great, Brian. I mean, that's what I say. Somebody who's comfortable with the medium is doing us all a real service. But this is the Wolfe Islander, and this is sort of late in the summer. I was probably up from Montreal for a weekend, and I was just on my way home, and it was a nice shot. And it was much more placid. He showed one of the Islanders some pretty rough weather out in the main channel. Anyway, I thank you for your attention and your participation. I enjoyed it. And as I said, I have the printouts here. If you want to look at any one specific picture, well, they'll be out on the table.
You see, folks, it's not that hard. You just have to get up and pretend there's nobody here. Lord, it's
Dark,
right.
I couldn't see your ugly faces.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lorne. Great turnout, guys. It was a wonderful
Here's some history of Founders.